Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Rashi Gupta, and I, along with my co-lead, Haridat, and the entire organizing team of MIT India Conference, would like to welcome you to the second annual MIT India Conference 2012. The MIT India Conference started last year based on tremendous interest from the MIT community to connect with and know more about India as the fastest growing nation today. It was created as a forum to bring together industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and students to discuss the contemporary trends and challenges in India. With distinguished guests like Narayan Murthy speaking at the conference, it was also aimed to develop lasting relationships between India and the US. The theme for this year's conference is Bridges. Panelists this year will represent a variety of professional and cultural backgrounds that deal with building bridges, whether cultural, economic, or political, between India and the world. This year's conference aims to reinforce those bridges. Bridges for people in the US to know more about India, bridges for people outside to connect with and participate in the journey of India towards a successful nation. We hope you find the sessions and conversations today enriching and enjoyable, and build new connections. On behalf of the entire organizing team, I would once again like to welcome you to the second annual MIT India Conference. I would now like to welcome Deputy Dean of MIT Sloan School of Management, S.P. Kothari, to introduce our first keynote for the day.
Good morning. Thank you, Rashi. I do want to congratulate all the student body that has been so instrumental in organizing a very successful conference. I mean, last year was a success, and this is just the second conference, but we are building on the strengths from the inaugural conference, and the lineup today is such that all of us would be proud of it. So thank you. Many ask, what does Deputy Dean do? And I think the best succinct description is everything that the Dean doesn't want to do, I get to do it. So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Nadir Godrej. Nadir Godrej, first and foremost, let me say that he is an MIT alumnus, and he's chemical engineer. So am I, but look what he has done with his chemical engineering background. And he really put that into practice and has become a leading consumer products industrialist that relies on a number of chemicals-based products and items. He is the managing director of Godrej Industries and chairman of Godrej Agrovet. He's also a director of numerous firms, including Godrej & Boyce, Godrej Foods, Godrej Consumer Products. He's a veteran of the Indian industry. Nadir has played an important role in developing the animal feed, agricultural input, and chemicals businesses owned by Godrej. Currently, he is the president of the Indo-French Technical Association and the Alliance Française Mumbai. For the contribution to the Indo-French relations, the French government honored Mr. Godrej with the, and I'm going to butcher this, Chevalier de l'Ordre National du Mitre, and the National Order of the Legion of Honor. So I'm proud, but he's fluent in French, but he has said that he will be speaking in English. So thank you, Mr. Godrej.
Dean Kothari, Rashi Gupta, friends old and new. Once India looked like it was shining. Now what we hear is mostly whining. Of course, if we were to be fair, we'd say the promise still is there. The population's large and young, so fulsome praises have been sung of the demographic dividend. But the game is not near the end. Demography is the beginning. It can't ensure that we'll be winning. The true salvation of our nation must therefore lie in education. Perhaps it's true no one can beat our educational elite. They feel at home in East and West, and many are among the best. But surely there is something flawed if many have to go abroad. Don't get me wrong, such exchange gives everyone a broader range. And travel, whether short or long, makes our students very strong. But tertiary education is limited in our nation. A mere 1/5 now make the cut, and even then there is a but. In IIMs and IITs, the students have good qualities, but as for much of the rest, they can't compare with the best. A big group in any event did not stay, but were sent abroad at such a heavy cost. And some may think that we have lost, but I don't think it's a brain drain, but a brain bank from which we can gain. And in due course, some will return. Moreover, there's a constant churn of people traveling to and fro and spreading ideas on the go. Your special skills you can share, whether you live here or there. But to educate the rest, which method might be the best? The state can well afford to pay, but that not be the best way. What people know, when people know that they can earn, that's when they do decide to learn. What if we have good lifelong learning with steady doses while still earning? We still need entry-level jobs, or we'll hear a lot of sobs. But once they're on the escalator, we'll see them rising somewhat later. In the field of distant learning, India has a need that's burning. And in this field and R&D, I see a role for MIT. All the answers I don't know, but Banerjee and Duflo experimentally can find what works and what leaves us behind. If we get education right, we can escape our present plight, which isn't really very bad. It could be better, and that's what's sad. Some think by far the biggest hits would be our dual deficits. The current account is pretty bad, and yet I feel somewhat glad that the size of the deficit is nearly a perfect fit with our immense imports of gold, which isn't consumed and could be sold if the need ever arises. Let's not be hung up on mere sizes, but see the composition too. The deficit is also due to capital goods, which we need, and which certainly will help to feed new exports and our future growth. But S&P and Moody's both will surely move to a downgrade if powerful moves aren't quickly made to bring in greater capital flows. Alas, that's the way it goes. The fiscal deficit is big, and yet we shouldn't give a fig if the GDP is growing faster. An identity we should master if the product of debt over GDP and nominal growth, you see, is greater than the deficit, the economy will still be fit, for debt to deficit will fall. And that's the number that we all should be tracking. Is it high? At 70%, we'll get by. And what is more, it will fall unless we make the economy stall. Of course, it's always worthwhile ending what's obviously wasteful spending. In spite of all the heavy debt, I feel the government should bet on future growth to bridge the gap. We should ignore the debt trap. The government is asset-rich, and in its stores are assets which could well be sold now or later. But prudence now would be the greater sin. Let me now demonstrate that India is a wealthy state. The debt's over $1 trillion. Now that may sound a lot to scholars. The rating agencies moan and groan, but take a look at what we own. Why, companies of every kind, several listed you will find. Swathes of prime real estate is often owned by the state, and foreign exchange reserves. And to my mind, all this serves as a useful backup store. And therefore, for some time more, let's tolerate the deficit until we are totally fit. The government does realize that in a pinch they'll privatize. Some companies they'll do quite soon, while others may take many a moon. And yet the pace should hardly matter. Ignore the pessimistic chatter, for asset worth can only rise. To go for growth is very wise. I strongly feel austerity will not give us prosperity, nor can it help with the inflation that is a plague in our nation. It's clear that it is not fed by wages, but instead is led by the price of commodities. One of India's oddities is their heavy weight in our indices. Even in the measure RBI sees, that's manufactured goods, they get lost in the woods, for value added is very small, and commodities are almost all. I look at RBI askance because of their aggressive stance, but grudgingly I do concede they made the government pay heed. The price of diesel was increased, restraints on foreign flows were eased, the rupee rose from its lows, the Sensex very smartly rose. The RBI played a small part, CRR cuts are a good start. We need a fall in the repo rate to get us out of the starting gate. Now that the rupee is quite strong, inflation won't last for long. But in order to really win the race, reform must come at a faster pace. The GST should be in play, not just soon, but yesterday. We never seem to meet our goal of producing enough coal. Coalgate is cause for great concern. To global markets, we are forced to turn. Instead of producing all we need, this is a heavy price indeed. So should corruption mean despair? Or is there a little hope somewhere? Raghuram Rajan claims to see a promising analogy. Unstopped by man or by God, the robber barons ran roughshod, but yet they didn't last for long. The US emerged both clean and strong. What were the factors then in play that could help India find its way? The US's muckraking press, and India has that too, I guess. There was a rising middle class, and on that count we also pass. Let us hope that he is right, and we escape our sorry plight. But it won't happen by sitting tight. We'll have to rise and fight. So corruption will have to be fought, and education would have to be sought, but the third pillar is technology, and big breakthroughs we'll need to see. Our agriculture growth is slow. Most are resigned, it must be so. Unfortunately, land's finite, supply of water's getting tight. The situation might look bleak. There are solutions we can seek, and hybrid corn's already there. We can increase its area share. While rice and wheat give 3 or 4, with hybrid corn it's 10 or more. That's tons per hectare of good yield, and this is proven in the field. To other crops we should spread, and then we can get ahead. But that is not where it stops. We can move to high-value crops, and India has some barren land. The best use for this, I understand, is growing animal husbandry. Some think this is inefficient, but it can be made most efficient. If the feed conversion's low, or if the animals can grow on stuff that humans will not eat, then I think that we can beat this problem, and we can then show that agriculture will surely grow at a significantly faster rate, not just in some, but every state. And to develop our industry, the key will be energy. We should find ways to avail of fossil fuels locked in shale. We can't seem to meet our goal of producing enough coal, but we have one consolation, some of the highest insolation. The solar learning curve is strong, and I don't think it will be long when solar gets the lion's share of the incremental growth out there. Coal plants take ages to gestate, but for solar, we only have to wait a few months before they're up and running. So there's no point in quickly gunning for carbon-spewing plants we'll rue. And just in time, why not do new solar plants? Not now, but later, when the savings will be greater. You might think it's an oversight that I've said nothing about the night. Hopefully, we will soon see efficient storage technology, and what we generate by day will make the night go away. But older fossil plants will spew large amounts of CO2 to save the planet and the nation. we'll have to do sequestration or usefully use CO2. And I'm going to see something new that's called a photobioreactor, and it can multiply by a factor of 32 the surface area. Of course, I will spare you all the nitty-gritty details, but even if this one fails, someday I hope that we will see effective, cheap technology converting CO2 to oil with the lowest footprint on the soil. Don't you think it's pretty slick that microalgae play this trick? And we can learn from MIT how to produce clean energy, and manufacturing might start sprinting with developments like 3D printing. But nevertheless, we surely know our services will grow and grow. Here too, we need technology. In education, we will see the growing use of online learning, and learning that's tied in with earning. And in a recent report by Raphael Reif, he talks about the perceived strife of education on a campus site where few benefit from the light, and online programs where fees are low and millions get the knowledge flow. He says the classroom can be flipped, the student's attention can be gripped, the diagnostics can be weighed, and the content can be tailor-made. And he, for one, can clearly see that there will be a synergy. With education, both fast and slow, into the future we will go. This transformation of education will be the saving of our nation. Now, money is not the measure of wealth, but happiness and perfect health. In India, one thing is for sure, we pioneered low-cost cure. There's Jaipur Foot, Arvind Eye, and Narayan Riddalai. But we'll achieve real wealth when we succeed in public health. Clean water and sanitation will indeed transform our nation. Though it may seem a disservice, the government counts as a service. And it will be a red-letter day if we discover a better way. There is no doubt that our nation could do with lighter regulation. And the project for UID, if completed successfully and coupled with related IT and fast and broad connectivity, will help replace our subsidies with more efficient transfer fees and help financial inclusion. And all of this, in conclusion, will help our nation achieving both inclusive and rapid growth. I'd like to now thank MIT for this great opportunity. To Rashi Gupta and to Tuli, deep gratitude from yours truly. I'd be happy to take questions. Unfortunately, replies will be in prose, and you have to forgive me, it's a medium with which I'm not very familiar.
Covering the entire landscape of Indian economy, and where it is, where it's going, where it should go, and so on. You covered it all. What is your involvement, Godrej's companies, in other words, in any of the areas that you have mentioned, education, corruption, technology, and so on, because apparently your industries are many, many areas, both in terms of basic research and lots of products. So what are you doing specifically as Godrej Inc. to help in any one of these areas?
We're certainly helping in the agricultural area. We were pioneers in growing oil palm in India. India imports 8 million tons of palm oil, and we really think we can grow that in India. As part of our Good and Green initiative, we have got a goal to be carbon neutral. We have invested in windmills, and we are looking at solar energy. We want to make some experiments in that. We feel that already the costs have come down significantly, and since insolation is high in India, there's a lot of opportunity there. So right now we are experimenting, and we may go in a bigger way in that area. And we've taken on an initiative to educate 1 million Indians in the next 10 years. We want to do that in things related to our business, but not directly connected with our business. We are training salesmen, we are training beauticians. We thought that most of the beauticians we trained would want to be employed as beauticians, but almost all of them want to be entrepreneurs. And beauty salons are spreading throughout rural India right now. And so we want to engage in initiatives like this. My brother is the president of CII, and He's encouraging a lot of industry efforts to solve some of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you for that talk. That was great. Just a quick question on, you spoke about shale oil in India's context. So could you elaborate a little bit more, given the global dynamics of oil?
I think shale gas has made a huge difference to the US economy. And even a recent fall in crude oil was because not only shale gas, but shale oil, I think in North Dakota and other parts of the US. I know there are environmental problems with fracking, and we need to be very concerned about that. But to get gas at these to get natural gas at these extremely low prices could be transforming for the US economy. And I thought things were pretty bleak for the US till this happened. And now I think the prospects for the US economy are extremely bright. Because over a period of time, natural gas can be used to substitute oil, either in transportation. There are a lot of infrastructure costs required to be able to do that. But at this low price of gas, you can even quite economically convert gas to liquid fuel. And India probably has shale deposits, but India has a big problem with all the national wealth, whether it is spectrum, coal. There are no good policies to exploit it, and it's open to widespread corruption. And we need solutions for this.
This is actually a comment rather than a question. I really enjoyed your rendition and really want to comment that although you did not include the arts of India at all in your conversation, in your rendition, you certainly used the medium of poetry, so thank you.
Mr. Godrej, what is your vision for India given that they opened the doors for foreign investment, and how do you see India changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yes, I'm not sure if foreign investment is going to be transformative in how the Indian economy develops, but there's a big impact from the funds flow itself, and the fact that it is open for the funds flow makes a big impact to India. There are some people who think that modern retail will make huge differences to India. Modern retail is already there in the cash and carry, and in that area, it has made quite a lot of difference. But I don't think there's going to be a greater level of difference. I even think that modern retailing is probably going to be end-run by online retailing. And a combination of online retailing and small stores can probably compete very effectively with modern large format retailing.
Mr. Godrej, thank you for probably the most unique keynote speech I've seen, which is it's amazing, and I agree. Just a question around what is your view as one of the largest producer of consumer packaged goods, right, in India, as to this, the new legislation that's being passed to allow retailers like Walmart. You touched on it briefly in your previous answer, but what do you see as the impact to producers like you and what it does to the distribution network? Yeah, right now it's only allowed in large cities where already there are cash and carries. So I think it's going to take a long time before it's going to impact consumer products, because more than 50% of consumer products are sold in the rural areas in India, and there will be no impact of this for many years to come. In countries like the United Kingdom, where retailing is highly concentrated, consumer products industries have had a tough time, especially in food, where modern retailing is very powerful with own brands. In personal care and household care, usually consumer goods companies hold on well against modern retailers.
You talked a lot about education. Could you highlight some specific areas of opportunity, especially using educational technologies?
Yes. I think it's going to be very difficult in India to have enough faculty and enough teachers. So obviously, technology can extend the power of teachers considerably. And I'm not reducing the importance of contact time, especially in early education. So the real challenge is going to be find the balance between high contact education and online education. It seems to me that the optimal mix is a lot of online education with very rich contact times with live teachers.
Thanks very much. And I wanted to pick up on the comment in your presentation on water resources, and particularly in the agricultural sector where this pressure is intense. And I wondered if what you see as some of the main opportunities for innovation in water use efficiency and the ag sector, and how that might really profoundly change yields and other types of issues.
The biggest on the one hand, water looks like a very constrained resource. On the other, it can be used multiple times. And it can also be produced relatively cheaply. Even reverse osmosis is not very expensive. You could get water from melting icebergs. So actually, I don't think water is really very challenging at all. The big problem in India is not price. There is no watershed management. A big portion of the water in India is used to grow sugarcane. So you could overnight solve India's water crisis by producing less sugar. To my mind, it's a totally useless crop. It's not very nutritious. But try telling that to people. People love to have sugar in their teas. I'm wondering whether artificial sweeteners wouldn't be a cheaper solution and people eat something more nutritious.
Thank you for your speech, and it was really amazing to listen in the poetry format. Anyway, my question is about, you may also touched the topic of climate change and sequestration. And just in continuation to the previous response, in general, the issue is about education to the policymakers, to the industry, and even to the people who are in action, meaning, let's say, farmer in the earlier case. And same thing in sequestration about the industry. So how do you see the current situation with awareness of these issues?
Yes, on sequestration, there are very few projects going on in India, but the government's policy on solar energy has been very good. And there was open bidding, and the lowest bids came in as low as just under 8 rupees a kilowatt hour, with the mean price being 9 rupees a kilowatt hour. Since most coal power plants produce at 4 rupees a kilowatt hour now. It used to be 2 to 3, but it's going up to about 4 now. And as I said, the gestation period of the coal plants are large, and the costs of solar panels will probably continue to come down. They've been following a Moore's law of about a 7% decline in cost per year. A challenge in India is the current very high interest rates. And it's not just the short-term rate, but the long-term interest rates are also very high. So many of the solar plants are financed at 10% interest rates. Interestingly, I'm thinking of financing a solar project with dollar funding. I take the exchange risk, but my argument is that if the RBI controls Indian inflation, then there will be no currency risk. And if it doesn't control Indian inflation, then the price I pay for electricity otherwise is likely to go up in any case. So by financing a solar power project in dollars, you actually make it competitive with coal, which is prone to inflationary risks on the future price of coal.
So thank you very much for a very entertaining speech. I have one request and one question. The request is, would you make this poetry available to us to put it on the website?
Certainly, MIT is most welcome to use it.
And the question,
I have some copies here for anyone who would like it.
Great, thank you. The question is about animal husbandry.
Yes.
You obviously have such a deep knowledge and a unique perspective on it. Where do you see the role of technology in this? Not necessarily technology that is created in more developed parts of the world being brought to India, but unique to Indian animals and the situation.
The big part of the animal husbandry in India is the dairy sector. And since most of the concentrate that cows eat is not fit for humans, but the fodder that cows eat does not compete with human food, but it does compete for land. So the big technology needed is very high-yielding fodder. It's possible to get 6 crops of fodder per year, and if you have high-yielding varieties, we already have high-yielding hybrid corn, so if you make fodder varieties of the hybrid corn, you could produce a lot of fodder in very little land. So for dairy, that's the main thing. For poultry, the interesting thing is the development of enzymes. Enzymes help poultry to digest high-fiber food. So instead of feeding poultry cereals, you could feed them brands, like rice bran, wheat bran, corn bran, and which don't have much other use, and greatly increase their productivity. The other area which we are finding very interesting is early nutrition for animals. Early nutrition is neglected, and we recently introduced heifer feed, and that helps the cow to come to milk much faster than it otherwise would. And though the feed is more expensive per ton, it actually costs less because you're feeding it for a shorter period of time. And I think there's lots of technology that can go into animal husbandry. And in agriculture, just improving yields will have a tremendous impact. Water management, irrigation. In Gujarat, there's been 10% agricultural growth, and the biggest factor has been small local dams that store monsoon water and permit regular cultivation in Saurashtra, which is very drought-prone.
There's a question here. Thank you, Mr. Godrej, for your speech. You touched upon the GST implementation in your speech, and there are so many different taxes currently, like VAT and all. How do you think the implementation of GST will affect the economy, transform the economy?
We estimate that GST could boost economic growth by about 2%. GST is an ideal tax, and ideally it should be a relatively low GST. Since it's a value-added tax, there is no incentive to cheat because you don't get your credits. Unless you cheat across the value chain, you can't cheat. That's the powerful thing about GST. Compliance gets much better because compliant people can compete effectively with non-compliant people. So a lot more tax gets collected. I actually think, for the arguments I gave about the immense holding of the Indian government in listed companies, a low corporate income tax or a low GST would actually compensate the government for lost revenue with increased asset prices. If the government had tax policy to maximize its asset prices, it would set taxes at a very low rate.
I have a question. So you commented on the role of solar and storage technologies in the Indian energy landscape. Well, I'm a nuclear engineer, and I wondered if you could say something about the role of nuclear energy in India.
Yeah. I was at an economic conference at Stanford where I met somebody from Stanford's sustainable initiative, and she sent me some very scary articles about nuclear energy. And my perception before I read these articles was that human beings are unduly scared of low-frequency catastrophic events. And therefore, we find air crashes much more frightening than car crashes. whereas car crashes are far more deadly than air crashes. The same analogy could be applied to nuclear energy. But then she sends me an article which says that there's a danger that the fuel rods in Fukushima could catch fire and half the Pacific could get polluted and so on. What happens when the catastrophe is globe-threatening? Then this argument doesn't apply. Is it true that there could be a nuclear accident that is globe-threatening or not? I think that is the crux of the question. If there is no nuclear accident that is globe-threatening, even if it's region-threatening, you could still make a very strong argument for nuclear energy. But if there are globe-threatening risks, there is no place for nuclear energy. What do you feel? Yes, sure.
Well, I don't think nuclear accidents are globe-threatening, but maybe we can have this conversation later.
I think it's very important for the nuclear industry to prove that they can't be globe-threatening.
No, I agree that this is true. We have to design better and safer reactors.
From a carbon perspective and an economic perspective, it makes eminent sense, and I always give the example of France, with a good safety record and a tremendous economic record. And one thing France did to solve the NIMBY problem was they gave low-cost electricity around their nuclear plants. Thank you. Should I take one more? Yes. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank Nadir Godrej for this amazing session. He will be available outside if you have more questions. And I would request Dean Kothari to award this small token of our appreciation to Mr. Godrej. We will now have a break of 15 minutes, after which we'll start with the governance and the cultural panel. Thank you, everyone.